So as we continue, right, in our series in the Sermon on the Mount, we've covered just a little bit of ground. We're going kind of section by section as Jesus has been teaching, and after he announces the kingdom, right, if you remember back to week 2, he gave us really what I'm going to just call the character of the kingdom, like this humble heart, right, that understands that without God we're bankrupt. Like there's nothing we have to offer, and it drives us into this mourning over our sin, and that mourning of a sin, then it causes us to cry out to hunger and to thirst for his righteousness, which we know on this side of the cross was found in Jesus, that Jesus would fulfill this. And then the second part of the Beatitudes, we see a lot of the outworking of that start to happen. Right, it's the pursuing peace, it's the mercy, it's our motives and the pure heart, and then it's withstanding persecution, right? And then he gives us straight into this example of being salt and light, like being a visibly different body of people that our sole focus is that our works would give glory to God. And then we talked last week about Jesus fulfilling all of the law, and making a way for a righteousness that emanates from our heart. And that's where it's got to start. It's got to start in our heart. And then he's going to, for the next few weeks, what we're going to see, right, is much of the same. And it reminded me this week, one of Morgan and I's favorite shows right now is this show called SWAT. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. I see Colin's like, yeah, there it is. So SWAT, it's this... I mean, it's a SWAT team, and if you're familiar with SWAT, what do? Like when things happen, right? When things go sideways, they run into the conflict, right? They run straight in. I mean, they run into some crazy things. When other people are running away, they're turning, running, ducking, covering. We see this team of people tactically moving into the same thing everybody else is running from, because they're trained to do it. They're trained to respond. They're trained to keep cool. They're trained to de-escalate. They're trained to handle the conflict in a way that brings a swift and lasting ending. And what I see in this passage, and over the next few weeks, is Jesus is going to begin to train his disciples and train us to engage. He's going to draw down the kingdom character of those Beatitudes, right? He's going to draw them down, right? Showing us that true righteousness, right, is demonstrated by how we interact with our neighbor and the nations. Neighbor and nations, those people around us, right? He's going to train our hearts to respond, right? He's going to train us to respond when situations arise, right? And we have to act. We have to move in. And today, Jesus points us at how to handle fractures in fellowship because of sin. Like, let's be clear. These are fractures that have happened because of sin. And he's going to say, you have to step in this area as believers, right? So our redemption truth, right? Something that's going to drive is that the way we handle hurts and harms between one another should be marked by a spirit of reconciliation that reflects the character of the kingdom. The way we handle hurts and harms between one another should be marked by a spirit of reconciliation that reflects the character of the kingdom, right? Because get it, we all mess up, right? Who in here has not messed up in their life? Who has not caused somebody else to be angry with you? Who has not stepped in stupid, as I like to say it? Like, where your words, you're like, no, come back. And who in here has not been on the other side of that? When somebody has said or done something that has hurt you deeply. You see how we respond in those moments is one of the areas where Jesus is like, this is where you can really show the character of the kingdom. How you handle this as the offender or the offended. Both. What you do in this moment is an opportunity to testify to the glory of God, to act in righteousness. And we're going to start where Jesus starts. He's going to start right with the seat of the attitudes, and he's going to move out from there. So it's the heart. That attitudes matter just as much as actions. Attitudes matter just as much as actions. Go to verse 21 and 22. It says, "You have heard that it was said." So a lot of people's interpretations of Scripture this time would have come from what they have heard from the scribes and the Pharisees. Their interpretation would then be how I responded to these moments. That's why he goes, you have heard it was said to our ancestors, right? Do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. Yes, judgment. There's this legal thing where you did this, specifically murder, and it deserves this, which was actually murder was death. You kill somebody, you deserve to die. Right? And everybody in here, right, we could say, seems fair, right? But here's what Jesus does in correcting this interpretation. He takes it back. He says this, "But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says you fool will be subject to hellfire." What, Jesus? What? Like, you just said, and rightfully so, right? That the heart of the issue is the issue of the heart. Right? He says it's not just your actions that matter. You need to go all the way back to the things that are driving your actions to begin with. Because we know in Proverbs 23:7 it says, for it's like someone calculating inward. You see, I put the wrong one. That's my bad. I wrote it down. Let's just jump to Jesus then. Where he says this. He says, from out of the heart. Right? And then he lists all these evils that flow from there. It's in your heart. It's where things begin to work is deep within you. Actions don't come out of nowhere. They start with feelings and thoughts and beliefs, and they if they're allowed to sit, right, they begin to grow, and I'm going to say it like an infection. They begin to fester. And we get the sense of this in these verses right here where he moves us, right? He moves us deeper. He moves us deeper. Go back to verse 21 for me. And you see this. It says, you have heard it said, like, do not murder, and whoever murders is subject to judgment. Go to the next verse. But I tell you this, everyone who is angry, everyone who's angry will be subject to judgment. And what we miss with that, using that same word, is Jesus going, if you're angry, and let's define anger real quick, because there are some things like there's righteous anger, and that's not what Jesus is talking about, because we remember Jesus, we all got that somewhere. It's like Jesus went in the temple, he flipped the tables, he was pushing people, he was angry, but it was a righteous anger, because that's not how God said his house was supposed to be. The anger that Jesus is getting at here is this, and I know you felt it like I have at times, is this self-destructive, I want revenge kind of anger. Never felt like that? Like I want to take matters into my own hands. And he says, when you have that, and it says you'll be subject to judgment, and he's talking about the local court. The local group of, I think it's 20 to 30, you've got Pharisees or scribes or whatever in that area, right? They're going to judge you. You deserve to be judged there just for being angry. I love what African church father Origen, he says about the word here that is used for anger, right? He says, and this is another word that's used for anger, is thumos, is anger rising like a vapor and burning up. But the verb version of the word that's used here, he says this, it's a yearning for revenge. Like we yearn to make things right ourselves. Like here what he's saying is that kind of anger is the driver even when we get all the way down the field to murder. Leaving that unchecked, unsubmitted will lead deeper. And he goes deeper, right? I didn't even got there yet. That's great. It says, so you see him move from anger, and then he goes, if you insult somebody, right? And the way I put this is we move from angry in our heart to a verbal assault. Nobody in here ever verbally assaulted anybody, right? Never. I have never said, you're an idiot. like you really don't know what you're doing. Like we are all innocent of that charge in here this morning. I promise. Not really. But there's this verbal assault on the intelligence, and it tends to be a place where we start to heap shame. You know better. And maybe it even rises to the level of, like Tim Keller describes it as indifference. We don't really care. So I move from angry to being just kind of indifferent. And that's where he says, if you're indifferent, right, we're sending you to the Supreme Court. We're sending you to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. You deserve to be judged there. We send you to Washington, D.C. to stand before the Supreme Court to have them render their verdict. But then Jesus takes it one step further, right? He goes, if you say you fool. And we use that word, we might use that word a little bit different because you're a fool. Like, we kind of say it kind of flippantly. But for somebody to say that in this time, right, would have been making judgment on their soul. A verbal assassination. You literally just said, you might as well go to hell. You're unregenerate, you put yourself in the place of God. Which is why we see him go, you say you fool, you deserve God's judgment. And we see Jesus, like he's calling us deeper. He's calling us to the heart. And he's calling us to understand, like, we can't appoint ourselves judge, jury, and executioner. Like, we have to realize what's happening is that our anger, when we don't address it, will lead us down this path for character assassination. Like, we will have sinful actions out of this. I don't think it's a question of if, it's a matter of when. Like, and he's not beating them down with this. He's like, I actually want to help you out of this. Because I've already you got to remember, he's already told them what it takes to get the kingdom of heaven. He's already said it's got to be a humble heart, not a prideful heart. Like, he's already said you've got to mourn the sin, not take care of it yourself. He's already given them the answer before he even comes to reinterpreting what he thought they believed. And you see, allowing those angry attitudes to go unchecked are going to lead you into sinful actions. You're going to lash out. You're going to do these things. And I think you feel the sheer magnitude, right, of what Jesus is telling his disciples. Like, does anybody else go, this is, like, impossible? Like, how can I not want revenge? Like, how can I not want revenge? How can I not want to get back? How can I not? Right? It's hard. It's weighty. But see, this is why Jesus goes for this. We need to feel the weight of our hopelessness. But we don't linger in hopelessness. We come back to the cross. We come back to Jesus. He says, like, if I'm abiding, John 15, he goes, if you abide in me and I abide in you, you will produce much fruit. That's the fruit of the Spirit, which its essence is what we see in the Beatitudes. A humility that mourns sin, that thirsts for righteousness, leads with mercy, and seeks peace. In deepening amounts as we grow closer to Christ. And that's what he wants for us. And I want to call us to just a second to understand this. It's like when these sinful actions happen, right? Just today, right? There's collateral damage. When we take matters into our own hands, there's always collateral damage. We didn't mean it to happen, but there's collateral damage because we are not meant to be the executors of justice. Collateral damage. The people close to you are drawn into the conflict when you don't rest in God, when you're not first looking to him, when you're not first checking that anger. Words, actions, even feelings to some extent don't just pop up out of nothing. We talked about this, so it's okay to interrogate them. Where is this coming from? Where is it leading me? So ask yourself this morning, when you are hurt by sin, what's your go-to? What's your go-to? Mine depends on the situation. Right? How does your anger express itself? You got to know yourself, right? Sometimes mine goes into the pot on the back eye of the stove that the heat's on, and if you cook, you know what happens if you leave it back there long enough, what's going to eventually happen? It's going to boil over. It's going to be all over the place. But it's out of sight, out of mind, right? It's back there. It's not affecting anything yet. Or maybe in some, like you're the person that flash, boom, I explode. And it comes right out. So does it explode? Does it stay hidden? Does it come out and I have to tell somebody else? Like, all right, fine. They did this to me. I'm going to go tell somebody else. Gossip. That's character assassination. Like, does our anger justify our responses? Well, they did this to me, so I did this. Like, see what Jesus is doing here. He's saying, no, that is the reaction of your flesh. That is how you're going to respond. That's how you're going to be tempted to respond. That's what the enemy wants us to do. And what Jesus does next is he said, understand that your attitudes matter as much as your actions. The motives are going to come out. So let me help you with applying this real quickly. And he moves us, right? He moves us to these next verses, and I'm going to say it like this. Be a initiator of reconciliation. Be responsive, not reactive. Know what you're going to do before the moment even arrives. That's part of the SWAT training, is they know what's going to happen. They put themselves in those situations so that it becomes second nature. Morgan and I, one of our first dates, right? We were at Wendy's, because that's where all good dates go, let's be honest, is Wendy's. And we're sitting there, we're talking, and all of a sudden, all we hear is behind us. And an older lady had like either passed out or fallen, hit her chin on the table, was laying on the ground, bleeding. Like her chin was busted open. And like my instinct at this moment, bye, Morgan. And I literally, she's going to nod her head, yeah. I jumped up. I'm over there, and I'm like, napkins, because that's what I was trained, I was a first responder. I'm trained for those situations. I know, did you call 911? You call 911. You make sure the ambulance knows to come in this door. That's what I'm trained to do. Morgan is a very caring person. There's this little kid over here whoever was with them came to help me. So Morgan goes over here and cares for the little kid. Because who knows what kind of fear is going on over here seeing all this go on. You can't process those things. So we're trained by God to be initiators, not reactors. We want to move. And how do we do that? It says, so if you're offering your gift on the altar, there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you. See what's already going on here in verse 23. See what's already going on. Hit next. See what's already going on here. You have remembered, right? Something has come to mind. You know that there's an offense. And the fact that you're offering a gift matters. And we'll come back to that. Before I even get there, go to verse 24, and I want you to underline and circle in your Bible, right? Reconciled. Because we need to understand what that word means. And what it is this idea of a return to a favorable or friendly status. I honestly wasn't happy with that. Because like when I think of hurt, sometimes I'm like, what do you mean friendly? Like, what do you mean favorable? Because let's be honest, in some situations, that's really hard. Friendly in the situation of abuse. Friendly and favorable in the situation of this. What does that mean? And I think it's helpful to understand that this word in the Greek, right, it indicates an obligation of both parties to own their portion, no matter how large that portion is. Even when somebody offends you, it is your obligation to control your reactions and your responses. And that's the hard truth. And hear me say this lovingly. It's not giving them trust. It's not giving them more real estate in your life to hurt you again. But you have to work. We have to work our hardest not to go to verses 21 and 22. Because everything in us is going to drive us to do that. Or to drive us inside where we start to beat ourselves up. I should have known better. I should have done this. I should have. Like we put the weight on ourselves. No, we can acknowledge that wrong is wrong. We can acknowledge that pain is hurt. We have to acknowledge that we're hurt, that we're angry, that we're in pain. Like we have to acknowledge the feelings, get them out in the open, but we have to submit them to the cross. We have to submit them to the feet of King Jesus in humility, saying, God, I want everything in me to just be angry and mad, and I want justice. I'm going to own my 1% of this. He can have the other, she can have the other 99%, but I have to own my 1%, my 0.1%. It doesn't matter the amount. You're willing to initiate by owning whatever percentage that is. From 0.1 to 100. It's not what the other person did. It's I control how I respond. It's a mutual concession after mutual hostility. It's an imperative. This is an imperative, and it requires your words. It doesn't require just keeping it to yourself. We have to initiate by using our words to convey what has happened. And that's the kind of conflict resolution. Forgiveness does not negate the real world consequences. What God is calling us to here, it does not negate the real world consequences. But what it does is that forgiveness releases you from bondage to someone else's actions. You don't have to be captive to what they did. The longer you harbor the anger, the longer you harbor all of that, the more it's like drinking poison expecting somebody else to die. But there's something about forgiveness, about initiating that even in your heart. Because this person obviously had gone to the altar, right? And you can throw up the slide that talks about the what reconciliation is going to require. Like they had recognized, right? They recognized I have sinned against somebody. And they went to the altar because their sin required a sin offering. So they wanted to get right with God, so they brought their sin offering. And what Jesus said is, that's great. Be reconciled to me. But have you been reconciled to the offending or offender? Have you been reconciled to them? Because that's part of the process too. So what he was really saying when he says, leave it at the altar, think about it. He's talking in Galilee. That's like 80 miles away. Leave it there, bind it, leave it in front of the altar, travel the 80 miles back, be reconciled there, then come back and offer it. So you recognized it. You remembered it and you repented, right? You repented towards God and then you're towards the other person. Chuck Quarles says it like this. He says, Jesus' point, right, was that it is meaningless to offer a sacrifice and weep before the altar, pleading for divine forgiveness, when one is unwilling to express repentance towards persons against whom he has sinned and take practical steps to make things right with them. It's easy to say, God, forgive me. It's really hard to go, Vinny, forgive me for what I said, for what I did. Miriam, forgive me. Jerry, forgive me. Tony, forgive me. Because that means we actually have to put ourselves in a position of humility. We have to acknowledge that we did something wrong, and that's really hard. Let's just be honest. It's really hard. And guys, that's the steps that we have. We have to actually initiate those moments. So there's recognition, there's repentance, and restitution is going to come in with the next one because we're supposed to move quickly to limit the damage that sin causes. Like we're supposed to do whatever we can to limit by the power of the Spirit working through us, confessing, being that initiator, going to the person, having the hard conversation. Initiating, not giving space for that anger to take root. Like by doing that, we're moving quickly to limit what sin is about to do, or limiting the collateral damage, right? It says, reach a settlement quickly with your adversary, right? Legal language, your adversary, while you're on the way with him to court. Evidently, the sin has got to the point where we got to go before a judge. And what he's saying is you're going to go before this judge, you're going to be found guilty, and you're going to go to jail, and you're going to pay everything. You're going to pay the whole price, the full weight, and you're not going to get out of there until you have. Right? Sounds extreme. But it's always more costly. Hear this. It's always more costly to delay reconciliation. Like in this situation, right, this guy or woman would have gone to jail. Who's saddled with the debt at that point? They're in jail. What are they going to do? My family now is going to have, my friends are going to have to help pay for this. And I think in my head, like when I think about this, like I think about in our culture today, we're taught that our first thought is to get everything we can. No, you defend your right. No, you get everything. You go to the full extent of the law. It's very inward focused. And this is talking about when we're the offender, though. It's our job to initiate and do what it takes to have this relationship restored. Because of the mercy and grace that God has extended to me, I have to go and I'm asking for mercy and grace in this moment. Be with me and see the humility that it takes. See the character of Christ working out in you that I don't care what it takes. I don't care what it costs me. What's more important than that is I'm right with my neighbor because God has made me right with him. So I go and make restitution. I do what it takes to bring shalom, bring peace, because Jesus made a way for peace between me and God. Right? Can you remember a time where you let conflict linger and the result was significant? And not in a good way. Like just this week, I told my discipleship group, I've got to have this conversation with my brother. Like we just had something, we were just over the few months, I just feel this tension. And I honestly didn't know. Is it me? Did I do something? I don't know. But it was like we were talking about, I just feel like I have to. And to not have this conversation would just be disobedience at this point. Delayed obedience is disobedience. So they came over for dinner and we had this conversation. And it wasn't necessarily anything I had done, but it's just, there's things that have happened that creates a tension. And it's like that pot on the back eye where I added just a little bit of salt, lowered the boiling temperature, gone. And it explodes. And I was feeling these tensions, and it wasn't me that was necessarily the cause, but that tension just created, this need for reconciliation was present. And I'm not naturally confrontational. That's not my first move. This isn't hey, let's run into the fire. It sounds like fun. No. It was really hard. But what came out of it is as we talked for about an hour was just this, hey, what's it going to take to move forward? We need to do this. We need to do that. We were actually able to get our heads around it and go, these are the steps we need to take for our family in this time. Let's put it on the calendar rather than letting it linger. And just continue to be waiting. You're waiting for it to explode. Are there situations like that you know, I need to step into some things right now? You need to initiate. You want to diffuse situations. You want to limit the collateral damage. As an exercise in grace, because God's called us to be peacemakers, we lead with that. And I want to take a second to even take this from Jesus is very personal with this. But I want to take a second to say, as the church, the local body, when we see things where the church has messed up in history, that's also a chance for us to move in reconciliation. Where the church gets things wrong, it's a chance for us to move in with grace and be yeah, we messed up. We may not have messed up, but our people messed up at one point, and we want to make things right. And we begin to pull down barriers to faith. We begin to pull down things that keep people out of the kingdom because they never get an audience with the king. Because we're too busy fighting the barriers. We're too busy saying, I deserve to be mad. We have to move quickly to limit the damage. Because the way we handle these hurts, right? The way we handle these hurts and harms between one another, it's got to be marked by reconciliation. More than anger, more than bitterness, more than resentment, it's got to be marked by a spirit of reconciliation. That reflects the character of the kingdom. And I think one of the things, if you're a history person, I invite you to go to look up Jim Elliot, his story. If you're not familiar with him, I'm going to give you a brief, but you really need to focus on his wife. His story is great. Her story is powerful. Because here's why. So they met in, I think, in college, and her husband Jim is a missionary. Like, he was an American missionary going to South America, to Ecuador, among the Guarani people, or they're called the Auca tribe. So here's the thing. They were very isolated people with a history for violence against outsiders. And the story goes that over months they worked to establish connection. Then a team of 4 of them went in. They went in to minister, like try to reach them with the gospel. Like, they had the language, they were working on the language, they were working on like breaking down barriers, and they went in, and at first it looked hopeful. They were welcoming them in. Hey, come on in, come on. And when they stepped on the shore, they killed them. They speared them. Ran them through with spears. Could you imagine being the wife and finding out your husband just got killed? But Eliot's journal would say, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And that's sacrificial faith. But here's the fun part. Elizabeth, his wife, would later live among the Guarani and bring several of them to faith in Jesus. How she handled that moment paved the way for people to enter the kingdom, because she led with kingdom character. It cost her everything to forgive them. But because she did, somebody is dancing in the streets of heaven, singing the praises of King Jesus. Who's to say somebody around here doesn't need to see us handle conflict this way? Because how we handle that with our eyes on Jesus, the ministry of reconciliation that we've been given, that's part of the mission. That's the righteousness we're called to walk.